Hello, everyone, and welcome to Upish, the virtual Up conference this year. My name is Jordan Boesch. I'm the CEO at Seven Shifts, and in a nutshell, Seven Shifts is a labor management platform for restaurants. We help restaurant managers budget, schedule, and help them evaluate their staff, and we're used by over 14,000 restaurants across North America. Joining me today is Kyle Carberry, the co-founder from Coder out of Austin, Texas.
Hey everyone, I'm Kyle Carberry, co-founder and CEO of Coder. We're a Series B startup based in Austin. We're a 50-person team. And in a nutshell, Coder centralizes your software development. We're an enterprise software company, and we take development that happens all over the world on various engineers' computers, and we centralize it on organizations' infrastructure.
Awesome, Kyle. Thanks for joining us here today. Virtually from your home office in Austin.
Indeed.
And I just to give a little bit of context, for the folks watching, I would love to just kind of briefly walk through your background and in terms of walk us through the quick upbringing and how you got involved in what eventually became Coder.
Yes. So I was always kind of into technology. I grew up in a super small town, really agriculture based in Bruno, but always kind of had an affinity for like computers, tech, just like tinkering with things. I really got into software and kind of the deeper level of tinkering with stuff when I started playing Xbox when I was like 12. Played Xbox 360 and started playing Call of Duty and wanted to get max level in Call of Duty. So I modified my Xbox so I could host modded lobbies for people. And then I charged people for that. And that's what kind of started the loop of me copying and pasting code and eventually starting to write my own code.
Wow. So you wrote your own code using some like modified Xbox stuff. This is not so dissimilar to like my story too. Like it started with gaming and kind of modifying things, and it took a different form. But and then this led you to you have some co-founders now. Like how did they come into the picture? Were they working with you on some of these projects, or when did they come in?
Yeah. So after the Xbox days, I got into this weird realm of Minecraft servers. There was like a weird community of us that ran these servers, and players would come on and they would essentially pay for like upgrades or like special abilities in servers, special ranks, and just like various items to advance the progression. And that's actually where I met both of my co-founders. For John Andrew, I had a website called perfectplugins.ca where I advertised my software development services for Minecraft servers. And he reached out to me on that, and we started talking, and then eventually partnered to make a server together. And then Amar, my other co-founder, came into the picture because he was also in that world, and we needed someone to help us with server stuff.
It's awesome. So you guys met there, and tell us about how you came up with the idea. So you're all together. You built plugins, right? And that's not Coder, but like, what were you guys thinking when you're like, let's do something together? Like, what were you thinking at the time?
Yeah, so we always just like did various internet companies online, even if it was stuff that was already made. So like, say we'd make our own pastebin because we'd be like, I don't like the syntax how to make a pastebin, or just like random stuff. So we made like a bunch of various things on the internet together, and Coder came to be a little bit due to naivety. I was writing Minecraft plugins, and I was like, I really wish that I could just write this on the server instead of having to kind of jank it and like sync the binary. And that was like the initial touch point of where I was like, like it'd be cool if this happened one day. And it kind of seems like a natural evolution to say like eventually people will just be coding software where they run it, instead of developing in a local environment and then pushing to the cloud. So.
Right. So you guys had an actual pain point that you experienced, and you're like, you just wanted to write code in the cloud. You didn't want to have to download an IDE. You didn't want to have to write in there, and it just didn't make sense to you. So this is something you guys all sought out that you wanted to band together and solve.
100%. Yeah, it was the divergence for us between like, trying to develop like locally and test locally and all that jazz, and then like push to production where the environment was entirely different.
Gotcha. So fast forward, we're gonna like jump a little bit further here down the road in terms of this actually becoming a pitchable company. I'd love to know, after you guys got some early traction with Coder, and you and I talked a little bit offline before around just pitching VCs. Like talk us through those initial moments of actually like reaching out, and like what was the response?
Yes. So we had zero connections in the VC community or investment of any kind, or like Silicon Valley, any of that. It was all done through just like cold reach out. And we're just like, hey, we have this idea. You can check it out on coder.com. The initial kind of version of Coder was you could sign up to coder.com and we'd give you a computer that you could just start coding on immediately. And that's what we initially pitched to investors. And mostly everyone told us no when we were going to raise our seed. And that experience was extremely difficult, because when you have something that you're like, I've invested 1.5 years of my life into this, and everyone's being like, you didn't do it right. It's a tough thing to face.
But you guys found someone that eventually that said what? They said something different than no. First, actually, first off, why did people say no?
Yes. So we didn't really have any plans. We had, really what we pitched was the grand idea that like eventually people will be coding on servers, and we will not stop until we make that happen. And while it sounds like an attractive idea, our product was quite distant from actually making that happen. And the road to that isn't something that we clearly define by any capacity. So I think that's really why people were saying no, because they.
What about how young you guys are? Did that factor in?
Yeah, so it's like a good and a bad. So people saw the potential, because when we were pitching our seed round, we were like 20 years old. I think we just turned 20. And people like that, but they also hated that, because they knew that when you're that young, there's so many lessons that you have to learn, and a lot of growing up to do. So there's risk incorporated with that as well.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. So you got a bunch of no's for the reasons you just described.
Yes.
What changed? Who was kind of the person that kind of saw what you were doing and wanted to be a part of it?
So Andy McLaughlin from Uncork, we pitched him on kind of what we were doing, and he very much so knew that what we had at the current time was not what was going to make like a smack in the market. But he just believed that we were the team that wouldn't give up on pursuing the idea, and continually just like keep hammering it until we made something happen. And so he pretty much led the initial seed round that we did, and that was in October of 2019 or 2018, sorry. And then he had a friend, Alex Bard, at Redpoint, and Alex is awesome, and then they came in the round as well. They kind of split.
So you guys were in Austin at the time, and these guys are in San Francisco, right?
Yeah.
Did Andy from Uncork come to Austin to visit you guys at all?
Yes, it was a really important moment for us. And in venture capital, there's a lot of people that view their time as like so valuable that even if they're going to cut you a check, they'll be like, I don't need to come visit the whole team and all that jazz. I viewed it as like pretty important, where someone's like, I'll sacrifice like a couple days of my life so that I can, put effort forth to like understand what the pains you guys are actually going through, instead of just giving you dumb money. Because that's the opposite of what we wanted, was dumb money. We wanted people that would work with us and be like, we'll connect you with people that can actually help you and can guide you through this. Mm-hmm. So it was like a really, really critical factor.
Yeah, that's super important. I think even just for any founders listening, like we were the same way. Like our investors came from New York to Saskatoon to spend, multiple trips at the office. So I think those are hugely good signs. And I think that it helps you, I think for everyone that's taking money or raising money, it's really important that you kind of understand, almost like you're building a relationship. And you're going to be in this for hopefully the long term. And you definitely want to make sure you align on various things. Because I think we've both heard stories of founder fallouts with investors, and it's never pretty.
Yeah, it's something our investors always told us that it's like a marriage. So when you commit to say like I want to accept money from you, it is truly like a marriage on both ends, to where like you're marrying them, they're marrying you, and like even if times
Hmm.
get tough, you have to be able to work through it. And that's like a very
Hmm.
important factor of taking money for us as well, because we wanted someone that, if we were like this isn't going to work, they weren't like, well, no, I'm just not going to invest any time with you at all. Um, so.
Yeah. And so you guys raised some money, and what did you do with that money? How did you spend it?
Yeah, so actually a week before close, we actually did a slight product pivot, which is crazy. Um, and what we did was, instead of us creating our own IDE, we wanted to eliminate a pillar of adoption. So we consumed VS Code. Um, and that was like a big part of what we actually did with the money. Was we wanted to continue to like adapt and like iterate on what we were doing. We knew based on like some initial traction points that people liked the concept of what we were doing, but it wasn't sticking. Um,
Hmm.
so what we really did with the money was more like explore and iterate as fast as we could.
Hmm. So what, like, when you take that money, you're pivoting and you're exploring. Like, what are you working like? Is this like all day, all night crushing out code? Like, walk us through like a day in the life of just pivoting and iterating, because I don't think people really truly understand the amount of effort involved here.
Yeah, so it's a lot of reflection and a lot of introspection and a lot of zooming out. It's something we made a mistake of. Actually, we were building kind of in a bubble for like the first year and a half, to where we were
Mm-hmm.
like, we'll bring this to market, and we have it figured out and all that jazz. Um, and an important factor to it is that's just never usually the case, unless you can kind of tell the future. So what the day really looked like was, undoubtedly a lot of building and a lot of just like fast movement, but also a lot of as fast as we can, let's just ship something out the door and see what people think. Um, that was like a really, really key learning point for us, was instead of like building behind closed doors for a year and then we'll release something, let's try to build in public, learn in public, and get feedback as fast as we can.
That's super important, and I think any founders listening, like, you never want to lose that ability to iterate quickly, despite size. There's always room to test and make improvements based on certain small tests that you can run. But I think as you're starting, that's all you're doing for the first, like, year or two. You're just kind of like testing a lot of stuff, throwing a lot of stuff at the wall, but hopefully you're learning quickly too.
Yes. Yeah. And then after we raised the money, so we did our pivot, and that was just like an internal pivot. It wasn't like publicly or released anything yet. And about
Right.
2 months after that, we released what we were kind of pivoting towards. And you can see kind of in the history of Coder, as we've taken pivots progressively, they've gotten faster and faster to go to market. Because as we've learned, build smaller, reduce scope, try to pinpoint exactly what's working and what's not, instead of, let's build an ecosystem, release that, and then have to work backwards. Um,
Hmm. Yeah.
yeah. So we released that
So
like mid November of 2018.
gotcha. And then following that, you guys hit some milestones, and then you raised an A after that.
Yeah. So it was kind of a crazy world. New Year's of I guess going into 2019, um, Amar and I, we went on vacation and then we came back, and we were, we just kind of had the realization that what we were doing just wasn't working. The idea of like a consumer cloud where everyone hosts all their files with us and like we take care of it, um, it just wasn't it. And like we knew that and we had the instinct for it. And at that point, we shut it down. We just thought like this isn't working, this isn't it, and we're going to kill it, even though we don't have plans necessarily for what we're going to do next. Um, so
That's scary.
yeah, so from that point, it was one of those iconic startup moments where we pulled everyone into a room and we were like, okay, everyone, what we're doing isn't it. We explained rationale. We made sure that we weren't crazy, and everyone kind of agreed. And then we were like, hey, we have $4 million in the bank, but we have no idea what we're going to do. Um, and thankfully, what really kept people around and like morale wise, what kept things up was we very, I think, like instinctually hire people for their craft. And like we try to hire people that are like world class at what they do and are extremely passionate about it. So people that live and breathe software. And that's, I think, like what really kept people around is that ideology of like, we're a bunch of smart people in a room, we can figure this out.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. So, but in that moment when you guys pivoted, you were how many people at the time?
So we were about 24 people. And then after we kind of announced that we're going to shut down the consumer product, we actually had to cut about half the team. Because, you know, being a company with 24 people and having no idea what you're doing day to day is a really, really crazy situation. So we had to scale down the team.
Yeah. And those situations are never fun, but they're necessary. And I think, you know, it sounds like you had the right people in place where they rallied behind you guys no matter what in terms of the changes that you made.
Yeah.
Super important.
I'm so fortunate for the people that like were around at that time. They're all actually, every single one of them is still around the code today. And yeah, it was like one of the toughest times just in my life in general.
Yeah. And I think those hard conversations are something that, almost never stop happening, especially on the way up. So, and in terms of you guys having to, you raised your A and now you're going into your B. How is it different? How is raising your Series A different from your Series B? Like, how did it feel in terms of the differences?
Yeah, so our Series A, I'll give you some backstory as to how we raised our A. So we open sourced essentially what we made for like consumer product and all that jazz. And then it kind of took off. And then Redpoint came in and preempted our A actually. So they were like, hey guys, we think it's about time you raise an A. And at that point we were like, really? Because we were like, I don't actually know exactly what we're going to do with that capital. And they were correct. Alex specifically was like, you really need to raise this. And he was most definitely correct in saying that. And the real big differentiator between our A and our B was that in our A, we didn't feel like we knew what was going on by any capacity. And in our B, we felt like we started to narrow in on the market and are starting to tackle and segment and go to market more appropriately. Whereas in our A, we didn't actually have the product to sell at that time.
Yeah. And even in your B, like you guys didn't have like a big financial model with like, hey, we're going to add this many people, it's going to scale to this. It sounds like you guys were still developing like a lot of like the product to find product market fit, even within the B, but you were seeing some early traction.
Yes. Yeah, that's like a really important factor. That's something we're starting to do a lot more now is like appropriate like financial modeling and like trying to dictate the future with numbers more. But that isn't something that we had. We just had a lot of, I guess, like we had a really strong community of people that use our software and people that like passionately care about it and people that really want to use it. We have a lot of data from that to support it, which helps kind of back the traction. And that's what mostly kind of kept us going. We've always been like aware of finances and like we always care about it, whereas like we have to keep the burn like at a reasonable level, like just doing basic finances, but we've never done anything kind of like complex revenue modeling and such.
Yeah, I think there's a time and place for that. I think at least what I've experienced, and maybe it's similar to what you've experienced, is like really great investors understand the investment into great product. And if they see some of the indicators of a very strong product, i.e. retention or like stickiness, they're willing to kind of not kick the can, but put off some of the things that you think are like, oh, well, I need to scale it, and X dollars in equals Y dollars out. But at least on from what I've seen, some of them are like, well, we can do that later, but like, let's make sure we do these other things on the product first. Whereas there's other folks that are like, hey, you raised an A, it's time to scale. Like, where's your model? We need to see, and I need to know where my dollars are exactly going to like get those economics right. But then you miss all of the product stuff that you actually needed to scale. And it forces founders to kind of do those things sooner than they should because the product's not quite right.
Yeah, like we actually did that in our seed. We did like some basic revenue projections because some investors like asked for that. And honestly, one thing I learned from it is that it promotes the ideology of like chasing money more than anything, or even like going for short-term wins instead of maybe focusing on the long-term ones. There's most definitely a balance of it, of saying like, you don't want to be like, we'll make money in 15 years from now. But it's important to, from my experience, it's very important to like focus on product and like trying to define that market, and getting like a short-term win revenue wise is a very easy way to kill yourself long-term.
Yeah, 100% agree. So if you ever find people that, are in your seed or series A going, let's revisit cell G7 and like that formula looks off a bit, run. I think those are just not productive conversations. So
we've gotten offers to do like one-off, like weird things for companies where they're like, hey, we want this like custom solution and we'll pay you X dollars to do it. And it sounds great because you're like, oh wow, then that would give us like a nice uptick. But it's important because like long term would that have cost us more money by channeling our product into a very weird direction.
Yeah, let's touch on that a little bit, because like you guys are focusing on the enterprise, and from what I have seen within the enterprise, we're not an enterprise company ourselves, but it sounds like there are a lot of different forks that you could go down to do custom stuff. And how do you balance the need for custom things with the roadmap that you guys have and the vision that you have? Like, how do you ensure that they're not, conflicting?
I think we're in a very fortunate spot that like the need is good enough that customers or is high enough that customers are willing to sacrifice on a couple things. Most definitely stuff still comes through where they're like, I will not deploy this unless we do X. And unless either like the size of the contract is large enough or there's like some delicate balance where like a bunch of customers want it, we won't implement something, even if it's extremely simple. Because adding like that, kind of cognitive load and just like excessive, like kind of amount of features into the product that aren't extremely relevant leads to like a lot of breakage, just like a lot of debt tech-wise, and like a lot of testing that is unnecessary. So in all honesty, how we balance it is just trying to be very careful with what we implement, because we do not want to become a custom dev shop to where we have forks of Coder Enterprise for like each of our customers. We want to become like a unified product that's like, here's the abstraction we've made that gets delivered to every customer.
Yeah, that makes sense. And something I'm also curious about is how has your role changed as you guys have grown? You're over 50 people now. What's different for you?
Yeah, so I love writing software. That's like what I passionately do, and I do much less of that now. A lot of it's moved to like more higher level of saying like, maybe here's like strategy of what we have to tackle, and here's how we're going to segment the market, and these are the specific customers we need to go after, or here's how we're segmenting this user group, or reviewing RFCs, and doing much more like higher level, like I guess just like management of sorts instead of like IC tasks. We'll still do IC tasks, obviously, just so like I can resonate with that.
That's individual contributor for anyone that doesn't know.
Yes, and I'll still most definitely do those just so like we can relate to those people in the company. But it's a lot harder to find time for those now.
And I think this is like an interesting thing, because I think founders, at least even for myself, as a software developer, early days, detaching from that building in that IC realm where you're just like, no, I can just get that done and ship it. Like, why is it taking so long? I think like those are just endless thoughts in a founder's head. And by the way, they don't go away. But, I think that the ones that manage to really scale are the ones that understand that there's other responsibilities that you need to take on and that we need to take on as founders that are critical to scaling the business, and that those roles that you once did to kind of get it off the ground can be done by tons of other people. And hopefully they're smart people that you've hired. And it's going to take a massive load off to allow you to think high level, get the strategy right, and go raise another round of financing when appropriate, to keep going.
Yeah, and like a fair way that I've seen it is like as we've scaled, me going into the code base and like quickly hacking something that like might fix a problem is much less reasonable of a thing, because now we ship, critical software to companies. So if I, write a feature that doesn't follow the normal process that is shipped to customers and then it breaks, that's like a real problem. Whereas, when you're like a Series seed company and like everything's just so iterative and so quick, it's much less of a big deal because you're just like testing things and seeing what sticks.
Yeah. And just even touching on the whole idea of leveling up and bring on smart people that you guys have hired to do some of the IC work and built a great team. Can you tell me a little bit about how you guys went out and hired really experienced executives? Like, how was that process for you?
It was very difficult, but it was really critical for us because one thing that we try to do is realize what we don't know and try to like actually capitalize on that and say like, hey, Kyle, I don't know anything about sales, so we're going to hire an amazing VP of sales that absolutely kills it. And that process was really reliant on like our VCs and our advisors and people that we have around us to help fill in those gaps. Because like if you ask me, like what does a good VP of sales look like? I can give you just like rudimentary human values that I'd like to see culturally.
But I can't really targets.
Yeah. Like I can't concisely be like, this is exactly what that persona looks like for this company. So I'd say that process was absorbing like and really realizing like accepting I guess more of like we know what we don't know and then relying on our investors, advisors, and people around us to kind of help curate the right person.
Yeah. And when you get that right person in, like describe the feeling for you.
Yeah. So as founders, like we're all janking everything and like say like I might spend like an hour a day marketing, but I don't really care about it. But we're like, we shouldn't hire a VP of marketing because like it only takes me an hour a day. And when you hire like an amazing VP or an amazing leader in that realm, you realize how much earlier you probably should have hired them. Because what was like an hour a day every time before of like just a bad job being done, like they can leverage into like a full-time job and a full-time team that's bringing like immense value to the company beyond what you could have seen. Mm-hmm. So it's absolutely like an astounding experience to get someone that's actually experienced and to kill it in the department you have no idea about.
And I think that this type of role where every founder goes through this on the way up, where it's like, I can do that thing. It's only 5% of my day. Well, that 5% that you're doing is taking away from the things that you should be doing, and you're also not doing that thing very well because it's not your wheelhouse, and you're using 5%, and also you're gonna be rate limiting that department, and that department will never grow beyond your small 5% devotion towards that thing. And so you're just, it's something that I think all founders need to think about. And it's certainly something, I think we both think about all the time is like, we're the rate limiters on the business and the growth. Who we bring in and how they hire is it's highly dependent on who they bring in. And if we bring the wrong person in and they hire the wrong people and those people hire the wrong people, you've got a big mess to clean up. So, never be the rate limiter in your business if you can avoid it.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of nobility as a founder in being like, I do everything and like I have no time because I'm working 24 hours a day and like I have all these things to do. But it really just results in failure because you should isolate on what you're actually like amazing at, what you passionately care about, instead of trying to focus on like, I can just do that because it doesn't take long.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Kyle, we've got to wrap up here. It was amazing chatting with you as always. Before we leave though, what are your thoughts on coming back to Saskatchewan and building up the Bruno tech ecosystem? Is that in the cards at all?
So we're a remote company now, so we actually have no like limitations really on where we're based anymore. While nice. Still like based in Austin, we're hiring kind of all over. So if anyone from Saskatchewan or the entire ecosystem wants to apply to Coder, they are more than welcome.
Awesome. Well, great. It was great chatting with you, and we'll be right back in a minute with our live Q&A session. So be sure to stick around. Thanks, Kyle.
Sure.